Well, who's about to approach the stage is Pastor Gary, pastoral care pastor. He and his wife of 46 years, whose Peggy's birthday is today. So happy birthday, Peggy. Our parents of two, Kenny and Angie, and grandparents of two girls and two boys. They relocated from Missouri to Murfreesboro in 1990 to continue his electrical engineering career. In 1998, he became full-time at Family Worship Center 24 years ago. 30 years before that, at age 15, he was a church pianist at his church in Missouri, taught teen Sunday school at age 17, and became youth director when he was 20. A couple years later, he had his church in the teen Bible quiz to 2 national finals, winning first place in the nation in 1980 in Houston, Texas. And the years in between, he served as bivocational staff pastor, senior pastor at several churches in Missouri. And while here at FWC, he has served as a musician, Sunday school teacher, choir director, executive pastor, as well as Christian education and missions director. His and Peggy's love for missions led them in 2004 to ask for and receive their appointment to leave the comforts of home and acclimate themselves to life in Jamaica. Anybody feel called to Jamaica? Yeah, man. And later in the Caymans, amen, with responsibility for hands-on care and oversight for many of the children of Latin American child care, now called Child Hope. Peggy, a registered nurse, was an influential part of that assignment, teaching classes on abstinence and prevention of HIV, which is prevalent in the area near Kingston where they were located. Together, they preached, trained, mentored other pastors and leaders, as well as coordinating Convoy of Hope and other building and support groups, throughout the region. Pastor Gary and Peggy returned to FWC 7 years ago, and he has continued to serve in a variety of roles: administrative pastor, counselor, finance counselor, pastoral care pastor, director of Mountain Movers. Can we just give a huge, big standing ovation to Pastor Gary Pyatt as he comes to minister this morning?
Thank you. You're more than generous. Thank you so much. We are honored to have been a part of Family Worship Center. We're grateful for our time that we've had to be here. It's been wonderful. Thank you, Pastor Bryce, for this opportunity this morning to do this. And you know, when he first started here, one of the first things he told us in one of our staff meetings was that he was all about honor. At that time, I wasn't sure exactly what he meant, because I know pastors are all about honor as long as it's honoring them. I've been in this a while, all right? And what are they going to do, fire me? But that's not been him. He's been honoring everybody. He honors volunteers. He honors staff pastors. What an admirable trait. Yes. So thank you for giving us this opportunity this morning to share in the pulpit. Our ministry has changed significantly down through the years, but through everything, God's been there. God's been faithful wherever we've been. And you know, in following Pastor Bryce's series that's been going on stewardship, after we have been good stewards, we're supposed to use what God has given us for God's glory. It's not for us to just take and hoard it and say, look how good I've done, but it's so we can use it for God's glory. And this weekend is Thanksgiving weekend, and today that's what I want to do. I want to give God thanks for all that He has done. All that He has done. In Psalms 26 and verse 6, she says, I come to your altar, O Lord, singing a song of thanksgiving and telling of your wonders. And then in 2 Corinthians chapter 9, verse 11, listen to this. Paul's writing to the Corinthians. He goes, you will be enriched in every way. And here's why you're going to be enriched in every way. To be generous in every way, which through us will produce thanksgiving to God. Now, the reason we do this, next verse tells us, is for the ministry of this service is not only supplying the needs of the saints, but is also overflowing in many thanksgivings to God. So today, I just want to brag on God. That's what I want to do. When Peggy and I first started here at FWC, the church was a lot smaller. I think we were pushing right at 200 people on Sunday morning there. And our pastor at that time, he liked to do illustrated points and messages. If we could come up with some way to illustrate it, he'd like to do it. And many times he would call me and say, hey, can you help me with this point? Can you help me dramatize this? Come up with a skit or some sort. And so back in 1991, he was doing a series on stewardship. And he come up with an idea, and he asked me if I could help him with this. And so I'm going to have him play a clip here in just a minute, and he set it up. You may not recognize me. I'm in angel wings. And I have darker hair. At least I still have hair even, actually, at this time. And my job is one of the angels. The other angel is David Robertson, for those of you that might know him. And our job is to find people who are paying their tithe, who are volunteering and helping a church, the two things he's been talking about here, and bring blessings to them from the storehouse to give them. But every time we try to take them something, they come up with some reason why they can't accept it. So watch this clip.
Well, Bill, are we going to start paying our tithes?
I don't know about that. 10% seems like an awful lot of money to me. I just don't know how we get along without it.
But Bill, didn't the pastor say that if we brought our tithes into the storehouse, that God would open the windows of heaven and pour us out a blessing? I mean, don't you think he'd bless us for it? All the other people pay their tithes. The deacons pay theirs and the pastor pays his. Why can't we?
They must not have the bills we do. I mean, besides, God blesses his church. He takes care of it. And if we don't give, somebody else will give to make up for it.
Well, honey, if everyone felt like that, there wouldn't be a church. I mean, who do you think pays for the church building and all those programs? I don't think those people are any different from us. I just think that God blesses them for it when they trust in him and do the right thing.
Well, I'm still not sure about this. I mean, they want us to give offerings too. And then they're bringing these missionaries, these singers, evangelists, and they say, well, we want you to help and give to the poor. I mean, where are we supposed to get all this money from?
Well, honey, I just really feel like that if we trust in God, that the money will be there for us.
Well, I don't know. I mean, what is it supposed to? We're just supposed to go out to the mailbox and give them a mail or something?
I don't know. We've never done this before. I just really think that we need to give it a try.
Well, maybe you're right. Maybe God does bless them when they give. I just thought of something. The Word does say that when you give, if they give it to you, press down, shake it together, run it over. I mean, if we don't try this, we might not never know. And if we can't depend on God to meet our needs, we just don't have much faith.
Well, I think we should give to missions too. You remember that missionary that came last week with his picture of all those lost people that need Jesus? That really touched my heart. And I'd be willing to give up buying Cokes at the grocery store or cancel the cable television if we have to. It just seems to be the souls of
Yeah, so much of what we've been caught up in lately is just for this life. What we do for eternity is more important. I think I'm going to tell them I'm going to take that Sunday school class and start teaching.
I think that would be great.
I think I'll the pastor this Sunday. It's time we start living our lives for the Lord instead of for ourselves.
Sometimes our points get across pretty easy when you do that. The point here was that God has unlimited resources in his storehouse. And Malachi said that if we pay our tithes, God's going to open the windows of heaven and pour out his blessing. But too many times we keep those windows locked tight because we won't do what God's asked us to do. the pastor back then also had another thing. He wanted to increase missionary giving. He wanted to help with that. And one of the ways he wanted to do that was to get people to really understand what's going on with missionaries, was let's start taking trips, take teams and go overseas so that we could spend a week to 10 days with the missionaries, see what they did. And so we started doing this, and we started sending teams. And I'm talking about what this church did. You want to know why this church is blessed today? It's because of the foundations we had. Because we taught this, and people learned to give, and then they started doing the missions program. And my first trip I got to go on was to Costa Rica. And in Costa Rica, we built a couple of classrooms there. We did some evangelism, and I know there's people here today that were with us on that trip. I think that was also Pastor Wayne's first missionary trip too. He went with us. Then a couple years later, we went to Honduras. We made multiple trips to Honduras during the years. We built school classrooms, did evangelism, but we added medical to it. We had doctors and nurses and pharmacists in the church that would go with us. And in the schools, we would pass out, one of the big things they did was deworming medicine. Every year, we'd take them and give them medicine for that. We'd check for other things. We would deal with it. We went back to Honduras again. More classrooms were built in the schools. Then this church took a trip. We took a team down. We went to El Salvador. We built 2 churches in a week. This church paid for 2 steel frames for the church. We got down there, we erected those, and in one of them, we laid all of the cement block all the way around it in that 1 week's time. This church, this is what you guys were part of, and it's why we're still growing today. Then we went back to Honduras again. This time we built a trade school that the missionary was putting there, and we built more classrooms. Then we got to change boats, and we went to Venezuela. At this time, we had actually had some doctors who were coming, and so we took a total medical team. It was only going to be medical, and part of medical is you always get to share the gospel of Christ with them. So my wife and a bunch of nurses, and we had some doctors and pharmacists went to Venezuela, and we poured out medical for the year. We did some little surgeries even. We were doing it all in the parking garage of the church because they didn't have the church built. The church is being built on top of the garage. And so that's where we were, down there, and did that for a week. Then we got a real privilege, and the next year we got to go to Lithuania. We got to go to Lithuania, which is part of the old Soviet Empire. We were the last medical team they allowed in, and one of the first ones they allowed in after Russia had left there. We got to tell people about Jesus who had never heard of him. For 70 years, they've been with Russian domination, and they didn't know Jesus. And we got to go in there, and what happened here was there was a small church of about 80 people, and they said, we want to plant a church in this other town. Could you bring a medical team over, and we'll use it? And we got to the church there, and there was a Catholic priest in town that nobody went to the church. It was really a museum. But he heard we were coming, and he went door to door through the village and knocked on the doors and said, if you go down to that medical clinic the Pentecostals are doing, I won't baptize your babies or bury your dead. And all they heard was free medical clinic. Because they weren't going to Catholic church to get baptized anyway. So they came to our clinic and lined up for hours to see our people. And at the end of the week, we rented the movie theater for $12. Got the whole movie theater, one 100-watt light bulb hanging down there. And we did a service that night to tell them about Jesus. We planted a church in that town. This church. Checked on them just 2 years ago. That church, that week we left with 4 brand new Christians that week. It was really interesting how that happened. I don't have time to go into that. 4 brand new Christians. In 2018, they were running 80, and they were wanting to plant another church. Yes, give God praise. That's what our church has done. Then we had some people that said, well, I'd like to do a missions trip, but I don't want to go overseas. Can you find some place here to do some missions programs? We said, sure. So we went out to Pryor, Montana, to the Crow Indian Reservation. Took a team of people out there, and we worked on the reservation. We remodeled a church that was built back in the 70s, had bright orange shag carpet. It was amazing. We ripped the entire sanctuary out, gutted it, rotated it 90 degrees, rewired all the lights, put in carpet, built seats for them, built the platform, did it all. It was amazing transfer on the Indian reservation right here in America. Then In 2003, God finally decided that what we needed to do, instead of making all these trips, was Peggy and I just needed to go to the mission field full time. So our headquarters had called us and asked us if we'd consider going to Jamaica. Now, we didn't know anything about Jamaica either, other than sandals, hotels, and no problem, man. So we thought, if we're going to go here, we need to go check it out. So we flew down at our expense, and we flew down there. We got landed at the airport. A missionary that was already there met us. He says, here's one of the areas we need you to go. And he took us out to the school there in the country. We got to the school. We got out. We're looking around. When one of the girls took me by the hand, we knew where we belonged. You go to the next slide. That's what the school looked like when we got there. There's another slide, I think. The next one should have with us with some children on it, I believe. Kids from the school just wanted a chance to learn anything. And we got to be there and to work with them. And while we were in Jamaica, we built schools. Peggy ran a medical clinic on the center of the island. She did HIV and AIDS education literally in every public school in the country of Jamaica. She got to go to every one of them. You know, the neat thing with Jamaica was it wasn't just talking about HIV and AIDS, is they still have a federal law that requires a Christian devotion in the public schools every day. So Peggy would tell them about HIV and AIDS, and I got to do the devotion. We made a great team. We also got to mentor pastors. We worked on orphanages. We ran medical teams that came down. We had VBS teams. Churches came down just to do a VBS in the summer times. We remodeled churches. But the very first team that we got to have come down and help us as missionaries was from this church. This church. You might recognize some people up there. I think I see Miss Rita standing there. And there's Cindy Campbell over there on the side. I think Dan Hilliard's back there in the back there. We're doing, we're putting the first flushable toilets in the community. They had no running water in this community. And so we're putting these things, we're building the bathrooms there, and they're trying to get the cement poured for the roof. And so they're taking a bucket of cement, they're passing it. It's my daughter handing a bucket of cement to Miss Rita there, and they're passing it down so they can pour it. Because we didn't have cement trucks to bring it up there. They'd mix it on the ground, shovel it in a bucket, we pick it up and hand it off. Some of you say, well, I'd like to go do mission trips and do things, but I can't do construction. Can you hand a bucket from one person to the next? You can do missions. If you can pick up a cement block and carry it from one spot to another, you can help. We just need people that are available to come in and doing this. And it worked out so well. Now, Michael Hooper was on that trip. He's not in this photo, but he was also there. I won't share any more on that. I'll just leave that go. He was young at the time. We were glad to have him with us. Glad to have him with us. But when we got there, they were cooking for over 100 kids at this school, and they were using this tire rim to cook on. And they were using charcoal that they made there in their community, in their village. But because of donations from this church and other churches that worked with us, we got to build them a whole new kitchen. And I think we got a picture of the stove that we got them there to run on propane, that we got to set up with them, because this church helped us do this. We got to build a playground for them. They had never seen anything like this. In fact, the first kid that got on here, we thought was going to die. He got on the swing and he started swinging. It was a Saturday. We came out on Saturday. My wife and I did to hang the swing. So we had poured the cement before. We wanted it all to settle. We put the swings on. He was walking around. We said, hey, you want to try this out? He got on there. We had to show him how to do it. And he got going. He was going really high. We said, okay, now you need to slow down to get off. And he did not understand slow down. He just got off. And he was about 10 foot in the air, and I thought, the first kid's going to die. We're going to be sued. It's just terrible. He landed face down in the gravel, got up with this big smile on his face. Can I do it again? We got to build them a pavilion for that kitchen. There they are, standing there underneath the pavilion, eating at all the picnic tables. And if you look real lightly in the background, that's the ocean you're looking out at from up there on top of the hill where this school was at. But when we left in Jamaica in 2012, that school, it went from that bare bones rock on the side of a hill to looking like this. When we left, we had the wall around the playground, we had the pavilion built, we had this whole church had been totally rebuilt from inside out all the way through. Everything changed because this church supported us. Our number one supporting church was this church right here, and we want to thank you for this. And you sent the first team down to get us started. Before we go on from there, I just want to share a story about one girl in this church. You guys, a few weeks ago, Jared Smith was here, and he had people sign up to sponsor children. And that's what we did with our school. We had people here in America that sponsored kids for these kids to go to school. And one couple had signed up to sponsor a girl in the school. They paid for it every month, and they prayed for her on a regular basis. They even wrote her letters and sent them to her. And we know this because one day she got a letter, and she got that letter, and the same day she got told she needed to go home because her father had just been shot and killed. She got home, and her mom found the letter, and she's reading the letter. And she knows that when we send a letter here, it takes it a couple of months to get through the system and get to that kid on the site. And she's looking at this letter, and it said, "We know you're going through a tough time, but God is with you. He's going to take you through this, and know that we're praying for you. Just keep trusting God." Mom didn't know God. Mom had not gone to church, but this letter convinced her that God cared for her. And so she went to church. She gave her life to Christ. She actually ended up becoming a teacher at our school. When you donate and support these kids, don't just send the money and say, "Well, I've done my part." Pray for them. Cover them. If you can't, write them a letter. Encourage them. You don't know what's going to happen downstream later on. But someday, it's going to pay even bigger dividends. Story doesn't stop there. The girl's name is Chanika. And Chanika went on to our Bible college there in Jamaica. And at Bible college, she met a young man. And he was called to preach, and everything was going great. They're in Bible school together. But I don't know about you, but they messed up. People make mistakes. It happens. But in the church world, when we make mistakes, we have a tendency to just devour them. Instead of going to them and trying to restore them, we want to go to everybody else to make sure everybody knows what they did. And the Bible school had standards. They removed them from the Bible school, and I kind of understood that. But I didn't understand what happened next when the general superintendent called them and excommunicated them from every one of our churches and told them they couldn't go to one of our churches. And when Peggy and I heard that, we said, "It's one of our girls from our school. That can't happen." So we went trying to find them. We called them. We finally found where they were. They weren't really that far from us. We said, "Have you guys found a church to go to yet?" They said, "No, we're still trying to figure out what we can do. We don't know." They got the call of God on their life. They made a mistake. I said, "Tell you what, if you can get to our house Saturday night, come to our house Saturday night." They said, "Okay, we'll be there." Then we called a local pastor, probably my best friend in Jamaica. He was another missionary, but not from America. He was from Ghana, Africa. And he had come there to plant a church. And he wasn't with the Assemblies of God. He was with an independent group that fellowshiped with the Assemblies of God. And so I called him. I said, "Hey," I said, "I know they've been kicked out of all the Assembly of God churches, but they're not kicked out of yours. Can we get them in here? I think they'll be good for you. I think they'd work well there." He says, "Well, let's meet and talk." So we invited them over, and Peggy fixed a big meal that Saturday night. We had supper and actually watched Maury Davis on Cornerstone that Saturday night as a group, and then we talked about what could be done. And they were very repentant. They said, "We know God's called us, and we want to do the right thing." So they spent the night at our house. The next day, we took them to church with us. And a couple months later, you got a picture, I think, should be a picture coming up here of us in a crowd of people sitting down. Yeah. Can you find us in that photo? This was our last Sunday in Kingston at this church, and they wanted to thank us for being there. The young man squatted down right in front of me. That's Pastor Frank. That was my best friend there in the country, and he's there. But it's hard to tell, but in the very back left corner, there's a guy with a bright red shirt on back there, and next to him is Chanika. That's Musa and Chanika. And they're in the back row because they're just starting in church, just getting started going. But they're plugged in. Today, they're the pastors of that church in Kingston, Jamaica. James chapter 5, verse 19 says, "My brothers, if anyone among you wanders from the truth, and someone brings him back, let him know that whoever brings back a sinner from his wandering will save his soul from death and will cover a multitudes of sins." That's what we're supposed to be doing. That's what we're supposed to be doing. Now, a year later, I got to go back and dedicate their son. And that's me and their baby boy and Pastor Frank holding him there as we were getting to do that. And then the next slide, you see Musa. He's preaching in that church. That's him there on a Sunday morning. And I wanted to do a live thing with them this morning, but we can't. With technology, is a little tough to get that on the screen. But they're on Facebook Live right now, having church right now. You could see them right there. The next one is Musa and Chanika. That's the girl that was sponsored. Whoever sponsored that girl, they're laying up treasures in heaven still to this day because of everybody they touch. That's what the Bible means when it says lay up treasures on the other side. It's not about storing them here. It's giving them to God so God can use them for his kingdom. He did it. When you sponsor a child, pray for them. God will use them. Not only were we in Jamaica, but Peggy got to go to Haiti to teach over in Haiti about HIV and AIDS. And then they sent her to Colombia, South America. She was teaching doctors and nurses down there. She became very well known in this field. They had her going all over the place. And after 7 years in Jamaica, they asked us to move over to Grand Cayman to complete construction of the church and to pastor that church over there. And we did that for 4 years, 5 years, I don't know. It was a long, too long. We were broke. Cayman is expensive in there. But when you support missions, you save people from all kinds of things. I'm going to tell one more story here today as I bring this to a close. I'm going to show you a picture of a lady. I think you've got a lady in a green dress here standing next to a vehicle. Yeah, that's Christine Straw. Christine Straw was Miss Jamaica 2 different times. She won that privilege, and she lived right across the parking lot from us in an apartment complex. She came over one day to talk to Peggy because she knew what we did, and she came over and talked to Peggy because her brother had just announced to the family that he was gay, and she was really concerned about what this meant and what was going to happen with him. And she spent several hours with Peggy that day on that, and it opened up some other doors for us from that. And we got invited then to go down to the dump. It'd be like going out to Walter Hill, to the big pile, the big dump out there. Only in Kingston, the dump was not like that. We had families that lived on the dump that went through everything that was there so they could find stuff they could sell, stuff they could eat, stuff they could make a living on the dump. They were the forgotten people in Kingston. And we got asked to go there because they were having a Miss Jamaica pageant for the girls on the dump. See the next picture there. There's Peggy teaching these girls. And if you could see, there's one girl there that literally has a little sash across her because she had won the contest for being the prettiest girl there. And they wanted Peggy to teach them about HIV and about AIDS and about abstinence and how you could protect yourself. Because the way I would introduce Peggy at these things is I would tell them that Peggy has been there when they tested positive. She's held their hand. And she's held their hand when they passed away, and she's still HIV negative. And she can help you if you just listen to her. So Peggy's doing the teaching that night, and the next slide shows the boys were not invited this, but they didn't like that. So you can see them looking over the fence there. They're trying to figure out what's going on here. Well, they're leaving us out. But go to the next picture. We'll just leave it up there. They all wanted their picture taken with Peggy at the end of the thing. While Peggy's in the middle of her presentation that night, one of the mamas sitting off to the side yelled out, "So what you're saying, it's no possible. Abstinent, no possible in Jamaica." And Peggy said, "I don't understand how it could now be possible. God told us to do this." See, God has a plan to keep us free from these sexually transmitted diseases. Now, we don't teach on this a lot in church today, but the plan is very simple. If we are abstinent until we're married, and then we're faithful to our partner after we're married, guess what? We're protected. And she's teaching this to them, and she says, "It's no possible." And Peggy said, "God wouldn't tell us to do something that's not possible." She said, "You don't understand. Here in Riverton City," they called it a city, "here on the dump, when my daughter gets to be 14 years of age, I have to give her to the Don to do whatever he wants." She didn't have a father. There's nobody to protect her. The Don says, "I'll protect you guys, but she's mine." We're just a missionary. To humans, this looks hopeless. What are we supposed to tell them? And God told Peggy, say, Jesus is the answer. He's your hope, and he can take care of this. And folks, my heart was beating. I was crying, going, God, what are we going to do? What are we going to do, God? These people need some protection here. That Sunday, that mother loaded up 13 of those girls and brought them to the church. Sunday, at the end of the service, she runs to the altar, gave her life to Jesus. She said, "May try everything else, now may try Jesus." And we went home and we prayed. We said, God, you say in your word, you'll be a father to the fatherless. These girls need a father, and we can't do it. You're going to have to protect them. You're going to have to cover them. We've told them you're the answer. Be the answer. Monday morning, I got up just like I always do, and I got out the newspaper to read, and it was never to find out if anybody had been killed. It was always to find out how many had been killed the night before. And the headline story was, police go to the dump and killed all 4 Dons on the dump that night. Now, that was not my idea of how to answer this prayer. I'm thinking revival breaks out, everybody gets saved, this is going to be a great place. God took them out. Now, we're concerned. We called this mom. We said, "Are you guys okay?" She goes, "Yep. Me pray for protection. Them dead." God, all my life, through all of these things, he's been faithful. During my ministry, our ministry's changed many different times, and that's probably going to happen with you guys also. You might have been like me. I started off playing music in church. 35 years I got to play music for the services, and then all of a sudden, I was gone. But I can't stop at that time. You got to find, where's your ministry now? What is it you're supposed to be doing now? Maybe it's teaching a Sunday school class. I did that too. Maybe it's leading a life group. Whatever. It doesn't matter where God starts you. What matters is if that door closes, you find where he wants you to minister next. You find where you're faithful in that ministry. You got to be good stewards of what God has trusted you with. God will be faithful to you if you're faithful with him. I told Pastor Wayne many years ago that I don't decide how much talent I have. God decides that. I decide how faithful I'm going to be with that talent that he gave me. I asked them to come back up and sing that song again today as we go out about the goodness of God. All my life, he's been faithful. Worship him this morning. Remember, be good stewards of what God's given you, and God will bless you.
All my life you have been faithful. the goodness of God. Your goodness is running after, it's running after me. Your goodness is running after, it's running after me. With my life laid down, I surrender now. I give you everything. Your goodness is running after, it's running after me. Oh, your goodness is running after, it's running after me. Your goodness is running after, it's running after me. With my life laid down, I surrender now. I give you everything. Your goodness is running after, it's running after me. All my life you have been faithful. All my life you have been so good. With every breath that I am able, I will sing of the goodness of God.
Pastor Gary and Peggy, if you guys will come down to the front as staff, board members, if y'all would come as well. I just want to surround them and pray over them. How many of y'all like me, you're going to miss Pastor Gary, you're going to miss Peggy? Mike, if you want to come up on stage with me, love you, sir. Love you so much. I know you don't want to hear this, but I feel like you're just getting started. You have so much to offer. And I just feel like whatever you give in this next season, it's going to be easy. It's not going to be work. It's going to be easy. And I just feel like you've been a blessing to me, you're going to be a blessing to another young man and another young woman, another young couple in the faith. You have so much to offer. I don't ever want you to second guess that. I'm old. No, you have so much to offer. And for somebody like me, you've been an anchor. You've been just so encouraging to me. You've been so helpful. I could go a whole nother service just telling everybody how much he's been a blessing to me just over the last 2 years. It's been a lot. I guess I'll sum it up in 2 words. Well done. Well done. So I asked Mike if he would just come pray a blessing. If you would just stretch your hands, let's just pray a blessing over Pastor Gary and Peggy during this time.
Father, I pray first of all, selfishly for us, that the mantle of Gary and Peggy Pyatt would fall on us. I pray you would raise up ministers of the gospel from this church that 30 years from now, 40 years from now would share that kind of testimony. I pray that the work that he has begun would continue on and on and on to generations in this church, that we would see men and women who can say, God has always been faithful. I pray your blessing upon Peggy and Gary, that you would watch over them and protect them. I pray that you would give them the hearts of the people that they minister to now, especially their own family. I pray that you would use them to pour into. My imagination is that they have sacrificed even time with their family down through the years, and now that you would restore that and just give them a time to be with their children and their grandchildren, and allow them to see things in the hearts of their family that only you can do. I pray, Lord, as Pastor Bryce has said, that you would give them many, many more years and many, many opportunities and many, many more young people to bring under their wing. Pray that you would guide them and direct them in everything that they do. And now may the God of peace, who through the blood of the eternal covenant brought back from the dead our Lord Jesus, that great shepherd of the sheep, work in you what is pleasing to him through Jesus Christ, to whom be glory forever and ever. Amen.